Welcome to unPACKed, an open-minded podcast taking a clinical, not political approach to helping pet parents around the world. I'm Sailor Jerri, certified dog trainer, virtual dog training revolutionary, owner of Tulsa Pack Athletics, and creator of the open-minded approach.
And I'm Mattison, her friend, certified dog trainer and behavior consultant. Together, we have nearly 3 decades of experience in behavioral dog training.
We've been working with real dogs and the humans who love them to create solutions to problematic behaviors that feel too big for them to tackle on their own.
For Season 3 of Unpacked, we're doing something a little different. We're bringing you live unpacking sessions. Get ready to be a fly on the wall of our very first conversation with brand new guests. You'll hear us dig into a new case and offer mindset shifts and immediate strategies. Often the hardest part of moving forward with your dog is knowing what the best next step is to take. And we feel strongly that this episode format will help us get to the heart of things faster and bring you the lessons that will actually change your life with your dog. All of our guests receive free virtual training with our interns, so expect to hear more about these cases as they unfold throughout the year. If you are ready to learn from real behavior cases, settle in with us and unpack. Welcome to Unpacked. Today, we're speaking with Ruth about her dog, Corn, and their journey together in the heart of downtown Toronto. Corn has been with Ruth for almost 6 years, and while they've made great progress in managing his reactivity, the unpredictable nature of city life, street festivals, live music, off-leash dogs, continues to present challenges. One of Ruth's biggest goals is helping Corn feel more secure in those unpredictable moments, while also managing her own anxiety, which she knows can have some influence. She's worked with an e-collar to build engagement and structure, but she's looking for a reframe that will allow Corn some more freedom without increasing risk. So Ruth, thank you so much for joining us today. I know that we are all ready to have a conversation about e-collars and reactive behavior and some shifts that could really help you and Corn move forward, but I want to start with a very specific question for you. Can you talk to me about your life and routine with Corn? I'm looking for a day in the life of Corn.
Oh gosh, a day in the life of Corn.
Big.
It's Corn. A
He's
big
got the
lump of
juice.
love. Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's pretty like on routine. I think more recently we've been able to sprinkle in like more enrichment in the sense of like having more long line freedom and having going to more like novel places in the city that he hasn't been to, just because I recently got my license and I have access to a car. So that's been great.
Oh, congratulations. That's a big deal. That opens
That's
up a lot.
amazing, yeah.
Yeah.
So much. It was definitely one of my goals. When we got Corn, 5 years ago, there were just like trainers who were telling me like, take him outside of the city. And like at that time, it was just like not accessible for me to be able to do that. We didn't have access to a car. I didn't have the funds to be able to even like afford that. So it just like, we were very limited with like what we were able to do. Cause again, downtown, it's like very dense. So essentially I have a partner also. So we split a lot of like the responsibilities of Corn. So in the morning, I know myself, I have to kind of have like a very calm, chill morning. And sometimes that doesn't necessarily include walking Corn. It kind of, that really looks like giving to myself and being able to, I'm doing an animal welfare and behavior class. So in the mornings, I kind of dedicate a lot of time to that. So my partner will take Corn out of the crate. We'll go for a structured walk. Typically he's doing like place work while my partner's getting ready and like we're having coffee and he eats, we do all the things first. We eat first. We, have some coffee first. Corn will either get fed after the walk or if he's, being very patient, he'll get fed before. We're not really too like fast or like loose on that kind of thing. But yeah, structured neighborhood walk. And then when he gets back, he'll do a little bit more place work. We'll usually try to like mix in some like play with like tug. If we get a chance to do it outside, like flirt pole. And then he'll kind of be back in the crate for like a few hours until I get home for lunch. And then usually around lunch, I'm able to meet up and take him for a walk with like one of our friends in the neighborhood. So we'll do like a little like pack walk in the neighborhood. That'll be maybe like 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And then we'll get back. He's kind of in the crate again. And then on some days I'll be like, I'm able to take him out to, just down by the water. But most days it'll kind of just be like an hour long walk around the neighborhood. We'll usually go to like the dog park that's around to watch and counter condition at the dog park. Just because Corn, he used to get very excited about dogs playing. And I wanted to kind of use the dog park as a way to work on that. So we would like do our like 30-minute walk to the dog park, hang out at the dog park. Maybe I'd bring a toy, see if he'd want to engage with that toy. And then we kind of do a walk around and then we walk back. And that's kind of our daily routine. In the night, we more place work, more tug, just to get kind of energy out. But yeah, that's kind of it. Like that's the structure.
When you are on the structured walks in the neighborhood, what are the expectations of Corn during that activity?
So kind of like a structure sandwich. So I think about it in the sense of like, okay, we start the walk. Corn used to have this like big problem with like wanting to mark everything right away. Like we get outside, he's marking. And so, and it wasn't, and I knew that it wasn't because he like needed to pee, he's an adult dog. I was like, okay, yeah, he obviously just like wants to mark and maybe he's like a little bit anxious outside. And so I essentially will ask him to heel first, and then I'll give us maybe like, we live in like a laneway apartment. So I kind of give us the stretch of the laneway to have like a nice heel, lots of like check-ins. And then at the end of the laneway, I'll usually give him an opportunity to sniff. And there's like a little patch where you can kind of like, it's a nice like sniffy spot. He kind of knows that this is a spot where he goes to sniff and like just have a little walk around. And then when we are moving away from that, maybe I'll even like let him sniff like a little bit halfway up the second part of the laneway. But then we pretty much live in a neighborhood where it is all very high traffic streets. So for the most part, he is heeling for the majority of the walk until we can get to the high school that has more of like an open field area. And then there I'll actually let him like really sniff. Like I'll either bring like a long line or I'll bring my like retractable leash and I'll switch things up. I'll let him have like a sniff around there. And he's usually like pretty good around there. Like people typically don't let their dogs off leash there, which is why I bring him there. I try to go places where I know that people will not be letting their dogs off leash, or there will, there's like lots of security in Toronto. So like there will be people who are actually managing people who do let their dogs off leash. Because yeah, anywhere that's near a dog park, we can't go to because there is this like concern that we won't be able to manage. I won't be able to like manage the situation as well.
What is Corn's favorite thing, favorite activity? When do you, and see, I can see you smiling and laughing. So when do you just see Corn just so full of joy?
Oh God, it's truly when like I can picture it because it happened yesterday. We were at the beach. He found a big old stick and he was just running around with the stick, showing off, shaking his little bum, running up and down. He would kind of like come over to me to like engage, and then he'd do like a little play bow, and then we'd like run together up and down along like the shoreline, tug a little bit. Like that's his, like he loves that. He's definitely more like a sniffy dog. He doesn't really, he has some like dog friends. He's dog selective. I don't really push too much dog on dog play, but the personal play he loves. He loves personal play. He loves to engage with us in play. And he definitely shows us when he wants it. So we really do try to like mix it into his daily routine of just like some kind of personal play with him. Because he would be great. He would just be doing it all the time if we didn't give it to him. So he loves that. He loves tug. He loves to he loves to run free. Like it just is, there's limitations with that, unfortunately, where we live.
Yeah. So I definitely want Jerri to jump in and see what questions she has kind of floating around. But first, just give us kind of a high level picture of what are the really difficult parts of your day, week, or life with Corn? Like, where are you feeling like you need more guidance and support?
I guess like it's really, oh man, because sometimes I've noticed that everything we'll be having a pretty good walk. And even in my head, I'm thinking maybe it's because maybe he's been flooded with too many triggers or something like that. But just sometimes he'll randomly pop off. And I almost like, because it'll be like to different things. Like one time it was like, I mean, again, it kind of makes sense. Like it was like this cargo bike, but again, he doesn't really like lunge or react to bikers or skateboards or anything like that. Like that's something that we kind of curbed very early on and worked through. So yeah, like, so, and it won't be moving. Like it'll just kind of like be at the crosswalk and he'll lunge at it.
Was it something that he doesn't typically see as much?
No, we live right when you open up our door, it's a bike lane. So he sees
Oh,
them.
so he's used to that.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's super used to it. Like it, so I always wonder because I sometimes try to clock like, is it at the end of the walk? Like maybe that in my mind is like, okay, maybe we should have like gotten home sooner because maybe he's already like dealt with a lot of triggers and suppressed a lot of that like reactiveness. Or maybe someone because he's definitely I don't necessarily he's not good with strangers again, and everyone in the everyone in the world is a stranger unless they've done like an introduction with him. So that like
Right.
and in the city like if we're walking, and I always find that this kind of is the case when you have a dog, people will ask you for directions because they will ask you for directions because they believe that you know where you're going because you're like, oh, you must walk a dog, so you must know the streets. And when people approach me, like it's game over. He's lunging for sure. He's lunging for sure. He can pretty much ignore people as long as they ignore him, but it's like that random encounter. It's the randomness and the unpredictability of things. I think it makes me nervous because we've had some very unfortunate situations where they haven't been good encounters. And I think that I feed into that a little bit. And whenever anyone will approach me, even if it is like one time a friend was actually, they saw me across the street and I was crossing the street. And when I got there, Corn was totally fine. This person was waving at us. But then as soon as they like stepped forward, Corn was gone. And he had met this person before, but it was that unpredictability of it that he just went for it. And I was like, whoa, okay. And Corn's muzzle trained too. So it's like, if I feel like maybe there's some days where I'm like, oof, okay, maybe I'm not like in the best headspace, but I know my dog needs to get walked. I'll do all of the things to make sure that there's no problem because it makes me more comfortable knowing like, okay, if he does like get into a situation where he has to do that, like at least I've done what I can do to like keep everybody out of harm's way as best as possible. So I think that's like the thing that I want the most help with because I just, it's been 6 years and we've gotten to a pretty good place where, we're comfortable, right? But I'm very willing to push a little bit and raise the bar a little bit because I see that we've made a lot of progress, albeit it's taken 6 years, but I can see the progress is there and it's starting to plateau. And I just don't want to get to a place where I am like, this is it. This is our life now. Because I know that he can. I just don't want to also then put him in situations where like maybe he isn't ready for these things and maybe I'm not managing them the best way or moving through them in the best way. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. And also just, yeah, I also never want to be reliant on any tool. I think that there was a time that we were really reliant on like a halty, and then it was the prong, which we still use, and now it's the e-collar. And I think that I would, exactly what you mentioned earlier, like reframe. I would love to just like reframe my approach in using this or maybe not using it anymore. Like I'm open.
And that's something that Ruth and I had, briefly talked about kind of in advance of this call is following this conversation. Rather than having her work with one of our interns, I'm going to work with Ruth and we're going to explore some just alternative approaches and see maybe where the e-collar is working against us, maybe where, it's not needed anymore. And so I think that that's something that we can, maybe that's even more of a conversation after our time training together, where we can kind of look back on that and kind of reflect on that process. In general, very high level general statement that I'm going to make about tool use and reactive behavior is that when we have a dog who is displaying that type of behavior, what we are needing to help them do is decompress because they already have so much stimulus. And in fact, every tool you just described adds more stimulus into the situation, whether it's the e-collar, whether it's the prong, whether it's the halty. That is all more, when what we really need is less. So that's just something to keep in the front of your mind that often we feel that more is the answer and it's not. And what we need is to strip that away and teach patterns of decompression that dogs can actually repeat. But I'm sure Jerry has some more clarifying, investigatory questions to ask.
Well, I was thinking the same thing that you were thinking. That was my first thought, was it seems very stimulating. And the first thing that the listeners need to know is that I regularly have said this, that Toronto and LA are number one on my shit list for dog culture. I mean, I really just want to acknowledge how difficult it is to have a dog in Toronto, especially when you live in the city proper, like right in the middle of
It's a
it.
major city. I don't even think
Yeah,
everyone in the world
big.
realizes what a major city Toronto
Hmm.
is.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's very different than the culture in LA, but what they both have in common is this weird, bizarre entitlement around breeds of dogs, and the off-leash lifestyle in such areas of dense population is really bizarre to me. And it's not just a one or two times I've heard that. It's hundreds upon hundreds of times that myself and my friends and other people have reported that. So I think that's important to know. When I hear that a lot of tools have been added, it isn't really, I'm off of the moral thing now. I don't care about that. There's context that needs to be provided. These are layered, complicated situations that we have to dive into. To make blanket statements like somebody should or shouldn't be using a tool is a little basic bitch to me. You know what I'm saying? So I don't want to make I because everybody that's listening is invited here, whether they use tools or not, so I don't want to demonize tools. What I would like to say is that I am seeing this trend of people who have not been really ever taught anything about the inner workings of a dog, and they've seen dog trainers. They're trying to get help. They're looking at, material online. They may have even reached out for a consult or hired a trainer. They may have even had several trainers. The common denominator between everyone is when I say, what skill set does your dog have to be successful outside? And people start telling me, well, he heels when we walk, or he sits, or she, whatever the case may be, she waits before I let her out the door. And I'm like, those are all obedience related things from your perspective. So take you away. What does your dog have out in the world? And I think people don't really even know what I'm asking or what I'm talking about. So that tells me that the general public really doesn't actually know what a dog needs in the context of its environment, because the environment is so different, right? So if you live in the city and you have a dog like that's heavy on the black mouth cur, you're going to be facing problems that you simply cannot overcome because of their genetics. And I think a lot of times people will feel that plateau that you're feeling, like they've done these things, but is this the best that it's ever going to get? And the answer to that is I don't know. I don't know, because sometimes a dog, what they are, who they are, they cannot overcome the environment without tons and tons of human intervention, medicine, all this management, all these things. And some people are not equipped to do that, whether it's because they're not willing, or they can't, or they don't have the resources or capacity to do it. So this is a big hot topic for me, is particular breeds in the city. But a lot of us are born into a city, and that may not be the right place for us. We may thrive more in the country, or some of us maybe grew up in a little tiny town, but we really would have done better in a bigger school. Like you end up where you end up. So what can we do when you're in a situation like this and you have a dog that's really not very compatible necessarily with the city? The first thing that stuck out to me was when you talked about corns, kind of, Enzo's the same way. I'm looking for there isn't really a phrase for it, but it's like the nature of a catch dog, or the nature of a coon hound or something like that, where they kind of just want to be in the woods roaming around. My boyfriend, he runs gun dogs, and he went out with Enzo and I one time, and I said, what do you think? What do you think? What's it like? And he goes, it's like following an autistic person around in the woods with like no rhyme or reason, because they're looking for things. They're not looking for birds or bird scent like bird dogs. They're looking for what stimulates them, and they want to interact with it. And typically that means with mouth violence. That isn't like a quirky little trait of one of them. It's not like this sucks because they're like this. It's just what they were intended and bred for. And so when you mix that, a southern dog meant to kind of run around in the woods, it's the same thing happens with Catahoulas. I will see people in major cities with Catahoulas, and I'm like, do you know what that dog does? Wow, that's going to suck for you guys. And sometimes I think we just have to say that to people.
Yeah.
It's going to suck. There is ways to improve that, and it doesn't mean that you can't have a fun, meaningful life.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very much like if school wasn't built for you and you got to make it through school anyway, it's that same kind of thing. You can make it, you can do it, but it doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge that this maybe isn't the best situation. Because then I think when you do, it takes a lot of the pressure off to rise to the level of golden retriever in suburb. It's like that's not what's going on here. And so the expectations can be slightly different.
I was going to ask if that means we're going to pull Corn out of school and homeschool him.
That's it. We can't take this anymore, this public school system. That was an actual reenactment of something that I've said.
Yeah.
What I was thinking about, though, was the first thing that caught me was when you walk out of the door, just let a dog like that. Don't put him in structure. A black-mouthed cur would never have any interest in healing ever in its life. And I can't ever see how it would benefit that dog ever. And now, that doesn't mean I don't move my dog closer to me for management when it's necessary, for safety, just social appropriate behavior, those kinds of things. It doesn't mean you let your dog do whatever. It means that this is the dog I have. So when I go outside with my dog, who also is a catch dog, when I go outside with my dog, we're just sniffing. I'm not sniffing, I'm walking. But he's just sniffing, and he does that until he marks several spots and normally and pees and poops. And then after that, it's time to get dialed in. Dogs can learn any pattern that you present to them. It's better if you present them with a pattern that helps you get the job you want done. The job I'm always looking for is not whether my dog is perfectly next to me, or it's not obedience related. Am I managing my dog's nervous system? And do I feel confident? And then is he responsive to that management? If he is repeatedly not responsive to that management, I'm either up in a league I don't need to be in. I went up a weight class and oh crap. Or there could be something going on that day that is just adding, and he just can't overcome what that is in the environment. Or maybe there was a recent event. There's other things for that. So I'll stop talking so that someone else can talk. But those are just some of the things that I'm thinking about.
I want to kind of talk about what that might look like very specifically for us, Ruth, which is that one of the first things we're going to do is create an inverted structure sandwich where we do not start with structure. The structure is the meat, not the bread. Totally different approach where we don't want our dogs to have to earn their fulfillment. We want to fulfill them and then ask higher expectations once we've met all their needs. It's a totally different switch. I think you and your dog will be less frustrated with this inverted sandwich.
Okay.
And for the person listening that may be asking this, oh, so you're just going to let him do whatever and then you're going to ask? Well, aren't you reinforcing all these bad behaviors that you don't? I rarely look at dogs through the lens of behavior. The behavior is just this thing that's occurring that's like a little barometer for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like a little barometer for me to read, or like a litmus test or something like that. I never really think about it like that. I always think about my dog and like how much jazz is going on in there. How much arousal is really happening? How much fear is really happening? Because when you repeat patterns over and over and over that are successful, that will help you, you'll notice that your dog will start to kind of fall into that. And when they can fall into a successful pattern, that's where confidence grows. That's where they're not so focused on the novelty of the environment. They're more focused on completing this pattern that satiates this thing inside of them. Because remember, they're looking for stimulation, that he can't help it. I am also that kind of person. Right. Like, I'm like, ooh, ooh, I
Like,
want
I
to
want to go
interact
check
with
this
that.
out. I want to go look at this.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I'm curious.
Hmm. Yeah, so there's curiosity is wonderful, but it's a guided missile. You got to be
Mhm.
careful where it's aiming. So if you put it inside of a little inverted structure or a little funnel or whatever, a little sandwich, I guess, it's much more effective.
So there are two things that I want to talk about briefly that I think will be helpful for you, Ruth, and probably for the listeners out there. One is related to exactly what you mentioned earlier, of there were times that you sensed that things had built up in corn until they just exploded. We call that trigger stacking, and that 1,000% happens. That is a huge contributor to behavior. And something to consider is, when does that actually reset? And
Okay.
usually the nervous system does not fully reset until a good night's sleep. And sometimes not even then, depending on the extent of that dysregulation. Now, the other thing that I think is equally important here is looking at what actually is this nervous system bucket, because we have both good emotions, excitement, right, and not so good emotions, fear. They all dump into the same bucket. So if Corn sees a stranger pop out of nowhere and gets scared, and then maybe he sees a squirrel move and gets excited, right? Those two things stack on top of one another. And that's where we get, Jerry calls it the smearing of the emotions on the wall. Dogs don't even
Yes.
know what they're feeling. They're just like, ah,
Yeah. And I tell Enzo all the time, what's going on? You're looking a little jazzy.
right.
Yeah.
You're looking a little jazzy. It's not because there's something wrong with him being jazzy. It's because it's a yellow light flashing, Jerry. Jerry, if you don't manage this, we're going to get into DEFCON 5 because that is an American bully.
Mhm.
It doesn't have anything to do with how I raised him or how nice he is or how cute his little face is.
It's
He's
where
he
is his
is what
internal
he is.
state right now in
Right.
this moment. The internal
Hmm.
landscape of our dog's nervous system is one of the biggest drivers of behavior.
And it sounds so clinical and stale, like we know that. If there was a funner name for nervous system management, like, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, we would
We'll send
call
her
it
the
that.
video that you made, Jerry, of the turn down for what? Sympathetic. So we make it fun around here.
We do make it fun. That's what we call it. It's the Lil John turn down for
Turn down
what?
for what?
What was the parasympathetic song? What did I have? Now I
I
can't
think it was just
remember.
I think you were just being very contained and demure, as they say, and then
I
letting
mean,
it go.
what's in my head right now is Lionel Richie. So I'm not that
Hello.
I don't know. Yes. Yes, and I'm like, was it Lionel? Either way, if that's
We're
if
gonna
that
have to
helps
take a
the
look and let
listener,
you know.
yeah, if that helps the listener have some imagery there, I hope so. If your dog looks like they are in the line at the club, you need to take action.
If they're
Take
getting
some action.
that like look of like the head bop,
Yeah,
Yeah.
because once they go through the door, it's shot, 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 shot.
Yeah.
Okay. And somebody's going home wasted, and we don't want that.
we
Yeah,
don't
like
want
with
that.
corn, I definitely notice that like sometimes we'll be walking and it's like, oh wow, he's so chill. And then I just see that like the brow goes and it just
Mm-hmm.
starts and then it's like, oh now he's up straighter
Mm-hmm.
and the brow's going even more. And I'm like, okay, there's something. I mean, I don't
And Ruth,
see
you
it
are
or
so
feel
much more in tune with these little
Mm-hmm.
nuanced signs than I think the average pet parent would be. And that is going to serve you so well because we don't
I
have to
agree.
train your eyeballs to look for that. You
Mm-hmm.
already know his pre-triggers. And so all we're going to do is start inserting a slightly different intervention earlier on in those reactions. And you're going to have a completely
I'm
different
ex-
experience.
I'm excited for you to just learn the power of movement. Because whenever I see people that have a lot of tools, I feel like that is one of the big pillars that they haven't been introduced to. The difference, so we condition emotions, we train behaviors. I think that's
Mhm.
one thing that they have no idea there because it's so behavior focused,
Mhm.
in our industry. Movement versus stillness. That's another really
And
big one.
patterns, using
And
patterns to your benefit.
patterns.
Because our dogs are using
Oh,
them against us all the time, right? So
all
it's
the
about time we start
time.
using them to our benefit.
Yeah, I like to think of dogs as like little autistic children that need really that are like master pattern create like they're masters at picking up on patterns and they also thrive within pattern. You know,
That's
like I
me
think,
as a human.
yeah,
1000%. Yeah. As an
My
autistic human, that's me.
my partner's mom, like that's kind of how she like describes Corn, and like she sees the way that we like engage with him and all of this stuff that we like do with him, and she's like, wow, you guys kind of have this, child with a lot of needs that you have to
yes,
for. And I never like I didn't see it that way before, because I was like, oh my god, yeah, we're just like managing this literal wild animal in our home. But then it's like that recognizing of like, oh right, yeah, he definitely has like instinctual like deep needs that that are very specific to like him, but also just like as an animal as a whole, right? Like this is not a person, this is a dog.
yeah, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, and I mean to everyone listening, like when we talk about neurodivergency and people on the spectrum, and it's with love. Like
Yes.
it's
Correct.
I'm clearly sitting on it. I'm clearly on it. You know, so
Yeah.
it's not to say, it's really to highlight the beauty of the brain and
Yeah.
how you can interact with really multiple different species through patterns,
Yeah.
through patterns and compassion in your intention. You can do so much.
Thank you so much, Ruth, for coming on to talk about this. We will be working together over the next 4 weeks virtually, and then we're going to have you back on to talk about where things are at then.
So
Yay, I can't wait.
exciting.
This has already been so like refreshing, and I'm feeling very excited for the next
Well, we are excited too. Unpacked was created by Jerri Sheriff and Mattison Simpson, edited and produced by Josh Wasta under the supervision of Straight Up Dog Talk LLC and Emily Breslin.
If you are enjoying this podcast, follow or subscribe to be sure you don't miss an episode, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform.
Looking for more honest and relatable dog content? Check out our sister podcast, Straight Up Dog Talk. See you next time.